Thomas had lived on the same ranch for more than 20 years. And in all that time, he had never known a silence as heavy as the one that settled over his land the morning he realized his daughter was gone. Emily was only 15. Young but responsible. Always helping with chores, feeding the horses, and making sure the chickens were inside before dark. She had been his partner in everything since her mother passed away years earlier. That morning, he walked into her room expecting to see her half awake, wrapped in blankets, mumbling about how early it was. Instead, the bed was empty, sheets cold, the window slightly open, and her boots missing from the corner. Something inside him dropped like a stone. At first, Thomas tried to think calmly. Maybe she woke up early and went to the creek. Maybe she was feeding the animals. Maybe she was just angry after their argument last night and wanted space. But when he called her name across the yard and got nothing back, not even a distant mumble, he felt a fear stronger than any he had felt in years. Emily never disappeared without telling him. She always left a note, always sent a message, always checked in. That was their rule. He searched the barn, checked the stable, even climbed the small hill behind the ranch, scanning the horizon. Nothing. By mid-morning, Thomas contacted the sheriff. His voice shook as he tried to explain that Emily was missing. The sheriff sent 2 deputies, and together they searched the road, the fields, and the edge of the forest. Neighbors joined too, riding horses or driving wagons along rough paths. But the land was wide, the sun hot, and no one saw even one sign of her. Thomas felt helpless, watching each hour pass. Every time someone returned, shaking their head, he felt another blow strike his heart. As night approached, Thomas sat on the porch staring into the dark fields. He replayed every moment from the past week, wondering if he had done something wrong. Emily had been quieter than usual, more distant. She wanted more freedom, more chances to explore the land beyond their ranch. He had refused again and again, thinking he was protecting her. Now he wondered if he had pushed too hard. The guilt settled on his shoulders like a heavy coat. He barely slept that night, waking at every small sound, hoping it was her footsteps. But each time, it was only the wind or a restless horse shifting in the stable. The second day felt longer than the first. Thomas forced himself to search the trails again, this time going deeper into the canyon and along the riverbed. He shouted her name until his throat hurt. He checked abandoned huts, hidden paths, and even the old mining road no one used anymore. He imagined her lost, hurt, hungry, scared. Each thought made his heart race faster. When he returned home in the evening with no sign of her, he felt defeated. His hands shook as he tried to drink water. The house felt too empty, too quiet. He walked into her room again, running a hand over her pillow, wishing it would somehow give him a clue. That night, he paced the yard until sunrise. The sky turned pink and orange, but he barely noticed the beauty. His world felt gray. On the morning of the third day, Thomas stood near the fence line, staring at the long, dusty road, trying to convince himself she would appear. He had imagined her return so many times in the last 48 hours that he thought he was hallucinating when he saw a small figure moving in the distance. At first, the shape was blurry from heat waves rising off the ground. Thomas blinked several times. The figure grew clearer. A person. Walking slowly. Shoulders drooped from exhaustion. He held his breath. Then he recognized the way the figure moved. The faint tilt of the head, the familiar steps she always took when her feet were tired. His heart jumped. Emily. It was Emily. But before joy fully reached him, he noticed the second figure beside her. Another girl. Her steps were unsteady. She leaned heavily on Emily, who held her hand tightly as if afraid to let go. The second figure wore clothes torn from rough travel, and her long, dark hair was messy, tangled, and full of dust. Even from a distance, Thomas could tell she was weak. Very weak. Emily supported nearly all her weight. His confusion grew with every step they took toward him. He ran forward, calling his daughter's name. Emily looked up, her face pale and tired. But when she saw her father running toward her, Her expression softened with relief. She didn't speak at first. She simply threw her free arm around him, holding him tightly. Thomas held her too, feeling her shoulders shake. He whispered that she scared him, that he had been searching every hour, that he thought he had lost her. Emily didn't answer right away. She just held on to him for a long moment. When she finally pulled back, she looked at the girl beside her, with protective eyes. The girl's face was thin, her lips dry, her steps shaky. She looked afraid not of Emily, but of everything else around her, including Thomas. Her dark eyes met his for a second before she looked down again. Before Thomas could ask anything, Emily said, "Dad, please, don't be angry. We couldn't leave her alone." Thomas blinked. He didn't understand. He looked at the girl again. She didn't look like a local. Her dress was stitched in a different style. Her features belonged to someone from the Apache community. She held Emily's hand tightly, as if afraid of losing her only support. Emily spoke quickly, her voice shaking from exhaustion. She told him she found the girl, her name was Naya, in the canyon, injured and alone. She had been too weak to walk far, and Emily didn't know what to do at first. She couldn't carry her home, and she couldn't leave her. So she stayed with her, helping her survive for 2 days with only river water and berries. Emily had not meant to run away. She had been angry and wanted space. But everything changed when she found Naya. Thomas listened, unable to look away from Emily's tired but determined eyes. She explained that Naya had been frightened of something, frightened of people chasing her. Emily didn't understand the full story yet, but she knew Naya was being hunted, and she knew the young woman would not survive alone. Bringing her home was the only choice. Thomas glanced at Naya. She stood quietly, her breathing uneven. Fear and worry filled her eyes. She did not seem dangerous. She seemed afraid of even standing in the open. She looked like someone who had gone through something harsh and painful. Emily took Naya's hand again and whispered, "Dad, she needs help. Please." Thomas felt a storm of emotions inside him, relief that his daughter was alive, confusion about the stranger she brought home, and concern about the danger this situation might bring. But when he looked at Naya again, he saw not trouble, but a young woman who had clearly endured something terrible. Someone who needed safety. Someone his daughter trusted with her whole heart. Seeing Emily stand so bravely beside Naya, Thomas understood something important. His daughter had grown in those 2 days. She wasn't just a child anymore. She had chosen to protect someone who had no one else, and Thomas knew he could not ignore that. He placed a hand gently on Naya's shoulder, careful not to startle her. "You're safe here," he said softly. She looked up, surprised at his kindness. Emily squeezed her hand again, and in that moment, for the first time since her disappearance, Thomas felt hope return, not only because Emily was home, but because he realized she came back stronger than she left. Thomas guided Emily and Naya toward the house, trying not to show how shocked he still felt. Emily's steps were slow, and Naya walked with a deep weakness that made Thomas worry she might collapse at any moment. He opened the door and let them inside first, noticing how Naya hesitated, unsure if she was allowed to cross the threshold. Emily tugged her hand gently, smiling at her. Only then did Naya step in, her eyes quickly scanning the room as if checking for danger. Thomas brought a chair closer to the fireplace and helped Naya sit. She was so exhausted that even lowering herself into the seat seemed difficult. Her shoulders rose and fell with heavy breaths. Emily immediately fetched a blanket and wrapped it around her. She moved with a purpose Thomas had never seen in her before. It wasn't the hurried, panicked movement of a frightened child. It was steady, soft, and protective. He made warm broth and brought it to Naya, placing the bowl in her hands with care. She raised her eyes to him briefly, unsure if she should accept it. Emily nodded to her with encouragement. Naya finally took a small sip, then another. Her hands trembled slightly, but the warmth seemed to bring her a bit of comfort. Emily sat beside her, leaning forward anxiously. "Dad, I need to tell you everything." Thomas pulled up a chair and sat across from the two girls. He kept his voice gentle, not wanting to interrupt the fragile calm that had filled the room. He told Emily to start from the beginning, Emily explained how she had left the ranch after their argument. She had been frustrated, feeling like she wasn't trusted to make her own decisions or go anywhere without her father hovering. She walked through the field, then the forest, following trails she had seen before but never gone far along. She admitted she didn't plan to disappear for long, she just wanted space. Then she found Naya. Emily described how she heard a soft cry echoing from the canyon. She first thought it was an injured animal. But when she climbed down the rocks, she found Naya curled under a ledge, frightened and struggling to breathe evenly. Naya tried to pull away at first, thinking Emily was someone else, someone trying to harm her. But Emily stayed, talking softly, telling her she wanted to help. Naya had been too weak to stand on her own. Emily gave her water, wiped her dusty face, and tried to make her comfortable. She knew returning home immediately would be almost impossible with Naya unable to walk far. Emily didn't want to leave her alone, even for a little while. So she stayed with her for 2 days. She told Thomas about their nights in the canyon, how they shared a small piece of shade during the day, how she kept Naya warm during cool nights, how she prayed for a way to bring her home. Emily described how Naya kept waking up in fear, whispering in a language Emily didn't fully understand. But Emily stayed each time, reassuring her that she was safe. The more Emily spoke, the more Thomas felt his heart tighten. He imagined Emily alone in the canyon, caring for a stranger, surviving on almost nothing. He couldn't help but see how much she had changed in those days. She was no longer a girl who needed protection every second. She had protected someone else, someone in desperate need. Thomas looked at Naya again. Now that she had finished the warm broth, her breathing had steadied a bit. Her eyes held confusion, gratitude, and something else, fear. It was clear she still didn't believe she was safe. Emily took Naya's hand again. "Dad, she's not dangerous. She's scared. Really scared." Thomas nodded. He could see that clearly. "What happened to her?" he asked softly, not expecting a quick answer. He didn't want to pressure Naya, but he also needed to know what kind of trouble might be coming. Naya lowered her head. She didn't speak English fluently, but she understood some words. Thomas approached slowly, crouched near her chair, and spoke with kindness. "You don't have to talk now. You're safe here. But when you feel ready, we want to understand." Naya's lips parted slightly, as though she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Emily gently encouraged her, speaking slowly and carefully. After a long pause, Naya began to speak in quiet, broken sentences. Her voice trembled at first, but Emily stayed close, giving her strength. Naya told them about her home, the people she lived with, and how things changed when someone from her community blamed her for something she hadn't done. She spoke about hearing angry words, feeling unwanted, and running without knowing where to go. The fear she described wasn't loud, it was quiet but deep, like someone who had been holding her breath for too long. Emily turned to her father. "Dad, she didn't do anything wrong. She's just scared. She needs help." Thomas let out a slow breath. Everything inside him told him Emily was right. Naya didn't look like someone who had caused trouble. She looked like someone who had been through pain and confusion, someone who needed a safe place. He stood and said, "This is not the place for fear. As long as you are here, no one will hurt you." His tone was steady, gentle, and sincere. Naya looked up, eyes wide, as though she wasn't used to hearing such words from strangers. Her posture softened, her shoulders relaxing just slightly under the blanket. Emily suddenly yawned. Exhaustion had finally caught up to her. She had barely slept in 2 days. Thomas noticed the dark circles under her eyes. "You need rest," he said softly. Emily shook her head. "Not until I know Naya is okay." Thomas smiled at her determination. "She will be. I promise you." He helped Naya move to a small room near Emily's, letting her lie down on the bed. Emily stayed beside her until Naya finally drifted into a light sleep. The relief on Emily's face was unmistakable. When Emily finally went to her own room, Thomas lingered in the hallway, looking at both doors. He felt a storm of emotions he couldn't name. He had gotten his daughter back. That alone was enough to make him want to fall to his knees with gratitude. But she hadn't come back alone. She came back with a responsibility, a bond, and a decision he hadn't expected to make. As night approached, Thomas stepped outside to breathe in the cool air. He looked across the ranch, the field stretching far into the distance. Everything was quiet, but he knew quiet didn't mean safe. Emily had mentioned people chasing Naya. If that was true, then bringing her home might bring those people here. Yet Thomas didn't regret it. He could see the way Emily looked at Naya. She had risked herself for that young woman. She had chosen to protect someone who had no one else. Thomas couldn't ignore that. In a way, he felt proud Emily had shown a courage and kindness he had always hoped to teach her. As the stars appeared, Thomas realized something important. His daughter trusted that he would do the right thing. And he would. No matter how complicated things became. He went back inside quietly, checked on both girls, and made sure the doors were locked for the night. Emily slept deeply, her breathing soft. Naya slept lightly, her hands still curled as though she feared waking up to danger again. Thomas stood there for a long moment, watching them both. He whispered to himself, "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The ranch was no longer just a home for two. It had become a shelter for someone who desperately needed it, and none of them knew that the days ahead would test their courage, trust, and hearts in ways they never expected. The next morning, the ranch felt different. It wasn't the usual calm where Thomas woke early, fed the animals, and prepared for the day. Instead, there was a quiet tension in the air, the kind that made him look over his shoulder more than once. Emily and Naya were still asleep when he walked outside, but he kept glancing at the house, thinking about the two young girls resting inside. He finished feeding the horses before stepping back into the kitchen. The house smelled of warm bread he had baked early. Hoping it might bring comfort to Naya when she woke, Emily entered first, rubbing her eyes, her hair messy from deep sleep. She yawned and looked around as if checking the house was still safe. "Is she okay?" was the first thing she asked. Thomas nodded. "She's resting." Emily sat at the table, grabbing a piece of bread and eating quietly. She seemed calmer than yesterday, but he could see the worry still hiding in her eyes. Before she finished eating, Naya appeared in the doorway, standing silently, holding onto the wall for balance. Her steps were small, careful. She looked stronger than before, but still unsure of her place in this house. Emily rushed to her side. "You're awake. Here. Sit." She guided Naya to the chair beside her. Thomas noticed Naya's small smile, the first one since she had arrived. Thomas placed food in front of her, making sure everything was gentle on her stomach. Naya murmured a small thank you in her soft voice. Emily kept whispering to her, trying to help her feel safe. After breakfast, Thomas finally decided to ask something he had been thinking about all night. "Emily," he said quietly, "you said someone was chasing her. Did she tell you who?" Emily looked at Naya, who lowered her head at the question. There was fear written across her face, but she tried to speak. Her English was broken, but she managed to explain that a small group had come after her when she refused something demanded of her. She didn't give many details, but Thomas understood enough. She had run from people who were angry, and those people might still be looking for her. The thought made him uneasy. Emily noticed his expression and leaned closer to Naya. "Dad won't let anyone hurt you," she said softly, trying to reassure her. Thomas agreed. "You're safe here, but I need to know if someone might come to this ranch." Naya looked up, her face pale. She nodded slowly. Emily squeezed her hand. "That means they might come looking for her," she whispered. Thomas understood now that keeping Naya hidden wasn't going to be simple. He needed help. So he decided to visit the sheriff and explain what was happening. He didn't want to frighten Naya or make her feel unwanted, so he approached gently. "Naya," he said in a calm voice, "I need to go into town for a little while. I want to make sure no trouble comes here." Naya's eyes widened with worry, but Emily quickly took her hand. "I'll stay with you," He'll be back soon. Thomas left the ranch with a heavy heart. Driving into town, he kept replaying everything in his mind the moment Emily returned. The fear in Naya's eyes, the uncertainty of what might happen next. When he reached the sheriff's office, he told the sheriff everything he could, without mentioning personal details that might put Naya at risk. The sheriff listened carefully. "This could get complicated," he said. "If someone is chasing her, they might come here. But if the girl is innocent, we can't let anyone harm her." Thomas felt relieved hearing that. The sheriff promised to keep an eye out for strangers entering town and to send help if needed. Thomas thanked him and drove back home, feeling a little more prepared for whatever might come. Meanwhile, at the ranch, Emily tried to keep Naya calm. She showed her the farm animals, explaining their names and personalities even though Naya barely understood the words. But Naya understood kindness, and Emily had plenty of that. The horses especially seemed to sense Naya's gentle nature. One of the mares walked toward her slowly, lowering her head as if greeting her. Naya reached out and touched the horse's forehead, surprising herself with a quiet smile. Emily laughed softly. "She likes you." For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Naya looked around the ranch, taking in the open fields, the quiet wind, the sunlight warming her face. It was a kind of peace she had not felt in a long time. When Thomas returned, he saw the two girls in the field, Emily helping Naya walk slowly along the fence. The sight warmed his heart. Emily was talking. Naya was listening, and both seemed more relaxed. He approached them with a gentle smile. "How are you two doing?" Emily smiled. "Better." Naya nodded shyly, but just as Thomas was about to feel hopeful again, something shifted in the distance. A cloud of dust rose from the road. Thomas froze. Someone was coming. He narrowed his eyes, watching the shape of riders emerging over the hill. Two men on horseback. They were heading straight for the ranch. Emily noticed Thomas's expression change. "Dad?" she whispered. Thomas didn't answer at first. He watched the riders closely. They weren't from town. He didn't recognize them. His heart tightened. He told Emily quietly, "Take Naya inside." Now, Emily didn't hesitate. She guided Naya toward the house quickly, Naya stumbling a bit in fear. Thomas walked to the front gate, standing tall, trying to keep his voice steady. The riders stopped near the fence. One of them looked around sharply, his expression serious. "We're looking for someone," he said. Thomas kept his tone calm but firm. "Who?" The man exchanged a look with his partner. "A young Apache woman. She ran off." "We want to know if you've seen anyone." Thomas's heart beat faster, but he didn't let it show. He shook his head slowly. "No one's come by here." The man studied Thomas's face for several seconds, trying to read him. Thomas held his ground. He didn't let his eyes drift toward the house, even though everything inside him wanted to check if Emily and Naya were safe. Finally, the man nodded. "If you see anything, let us know." His tone held a hint of warning. Thomas simply nodded. The riders turned their horses and left, heading down the dirt road. Only when they were far off did Thomas let out a long breath. Emily peeked through the window. "Are they gone?" she asked. Thomas nodded. For now. Naya sat on a chair, trembling softly. Emily wrapped her arms around her shoulders. "It's okay," she whispered. "Dad protected you." Thomas walked inside slowly, feeling the tension still heavy in the room. He approached Naya and spoke in a gentle voice. "You're safe, I promise." Naya lifted her eyes, filled with gratitude and fear. She whispered something softly, words in her language, but the tone was clear. She was thanking him. Emily stood beside them, holding Naya's hand tightly. "We'll protect her, Dad," she said quietly but firmly. Repeating the same words she had spoken the day she returned home. Thomas nodded. He realized then that this wasn't just kindness anymore. It was responsibility. It was a promise they had made without even saying it out loud. They were now part of Naya's story, and she was part of theirs. The days ahead would not be easy. But Thomas knew one thing very clearly. He would stand with both girls, no matter what came their way. For the rest of the day, Thomas kept checking the road every few minutes. The visit from the riders had shaken him more than he admitted. Even when he tried to work, his thoughts kept returning to the two strangers and the way they had looked around the ranch, searching for something they were certain belonged to them. Every time the wind blew dust across the dirt road, he stopped what he was doing and looked up, afraid it might be someone else coming. Inside the house, Naya stayed close to Emily. She barely spoke, but she watched everything carefully. Every sound, every movement, even the shifting of the sunlight across the floor. She seemed to expect danger at any moment. Emily sat beside her most of the day, telling her stories, explaining simple English words, showing her how to feed the chickens through the window so she wouldn't have to step outside until she felt safe. As the afternoon sun grew lower, Thomas finally came inside. His boots were dusty, and his face looked tired, but he tried to smile. "How are you both doing?" he asked softly. Emily nodded. "We're okay. She was scared after the men left, but she's feeling a little better now." Naya looked up at Thomas, her eyes cautious but warmer than before. She seemed to understand that he had protected her again, even if she didn't know the full details. Thomas gave her a reassuring nod, trying to show she didn't have to be afraid. They all ate dinner together, simple soup and bread. Naya ate slowly, still not used to the quiet safety of the kitchen. Emily talked in a soft voice, telling funny stories about farm animals and the time a goat chased her around the yard. Naya's eyes widened in amusement, and she even giggled once, surprising herself. Thomas watched them both, realizing how much Emily had changed since bringing Naya home. She moved with more confidence, spoke with more certainty, and understood responsibility in a way she hadn't before. It made Thomas feel proud and worried at the same time. Proud because she had shown remarkable courage. Worried because danger had followed her home. After dinner, Thomas went outside to sit on the porch. The sky was turning purple, and the first stars were appearing. He felt the weight of the day pressing on him. He had told the sheriff everything except Naya's location. The sheriff promised help, but Thomas knew trouble might still arrive before any help could reach them. Emily came outside and sat beside him. "Dad," she said softly, "are we doing the right thing?" Thomas didn't answer right away. He looked at the horizon, the quiet fields stretching into the distance. "Emily," he said finally, "sometimes doing the right thing is not the easy thing. But when someone is afraid, and when they have no one else, you don't turn your back on them." Emily nodded, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I knew you'd say that." He smiled. "You did the right thing too. You helped someone who needed help." They sat in silence for a moment before Emily whispered, "I don't want anything bad to happen to her." Thomas looked at his daughter, her tired eyes, her worried expression, and he reached out and placed an arm around her. "It won't," he said quietly. "Not while she's here." Later that night, Thomas checked the locks again. He peeked into the small room where Naya slept. She lay curled on the bed, wrapped in blankets, breathing steadily but lightly, as though she was afraid to fall too deeply asleep. Emily slept on the floor beside her, refusing to leave her alone. Seeing them there, side by side, Thomas felt something shift in his heart, something protective and gentle. He whispered to himself, "They're safe tonight." But morning brought a new worry. Thomas woke early, as usual, and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sun barely rising. But as he walked toward the barn, he saw something that made him stop completely. Tracks, fresh horse tracks. They led from the road to the edge of his property, then turned back. As if someone had come at night. Silently. Checking the ranch from a distance, he felt a cold chill run down his spine. Someone had been watching. He walked back inside quickly. Emily was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, and Naya stood beside her, stirring a pot with careful movements as if trying to learn. Emily noticed the tension on her father's face. "Dad? What happened?" Thomas didn't want to frighten Naya, but he couldn't lie. Someone was out there last night. They didn't come close, but they were there. Emily froze. Naya looked down, her face paling. Thomas gently placed his hands on the table. Listen. I talked to the sheriff. He'll help us. But until then, we stay alert. No one goes outside alone. And if anyone comes, you two stay inside. Understand? Understand. Emily nodded immediately. Naya nodded too, though her hands trembled slightly. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Thomas kept checking the road while working. Emily and Naya stayed inside, trying to keep busy. Emily taught her more English words: house, chair, sun, safe. Each time Naya repeated a word, something softened in her expression, as if learning the language made her feel a little less like a frightened outsider. Around midday, the sheriff arrived with 2 deputies. They checked the property, looked at the tracks, and talked quietly with Thomas. The sheriff put a hand on Thomas's shoulder. We'll patrol near your ranch for the next few days, he promised. If those riders return, we'll be here. Thomas thanked him sincerely. As the sheriff left, Naya stood near the window, watching the horses ride away. She didn't speak, but her eyes followed the sheriff until he was gone. Emily walked to her and whispered, "They're here to help us. You're not alone anymore." Naya blinked slowly, trying to hold back tears, then nodded. That evening, peace returned for a little while. Emily helped Naya brush one of the horses, guiding her hands gently. Naya was afraid at first, but the horse remained calm, and slowly, her fear faded. She stroked the horse's mane, and for the first time since arriving, she looked truly relaxed. When they returned to the house, Thomas smiled at the sight of them. Emily chatted happily, telling Naya about the way the ranch looked in spring. With wildflowers covering the hills, Naya listened with quiet attention, absorbing every word she could. Dinner was warm and comforting. Naya ate with more confidence than before. Emily kept glancing at her father, as if checking whether he was still worried. Thomas smiled each time, trying to reassure her. After dinner, the 3 of them sat outside to watch the day turn into evening. The sky turned orange, then red, then deep blue. Naya held her blanket close, but she looked up at the sky with wide eyes, seeing the beauty around her. Emily whispered, "It's peaceful, isn't it?" Naya nodded softly. Thomas glanced at them both. "As long as we stick together," he said, "we'll keep this peace." It wasn't just a promise, it was a vow. A few hours later, after the girls went to bed, Thomas stood at the window, watching the road again. He knew danger might still come, but he also knew something else. He wasn't standing alone anymore. He was standing for something right, something good. He whispered to himself, "Whatever happens, I will protect them." And in the quiet of the night, for the first time in days, he believed it fully. The next morning came quietly, but Thomas felt a strange heaviness in the air, as if the ranch itself was waiting for something. He woke earlier than usual, stepping outside before the sun fully rose. The sky was pale blue and calm, but his mind wasn't. He checked the road, scanned the fence line, and listened for unusual sounds. The night before had been peaceful, but peace didn't always mean safety. Inside the house, he could hear Emily and Naya waking. Their voices were soft, almost careful, as if both were still afraid of what the day might bring. When Thomas stepped back inside, Emily was helping Naya braid her hair. Naya sat still, letting Emily's hands move gently through her dark strands. She looked calmer than she had in days. Emily smiled when she saw her father. "Morning, Dad." Naya gave a small nod too, still shy but full of trust. Thomas smiled back. "Morning, you two. Breakfast is ready." They sat together at the table. Naya ate slowly, her eyes lifting occasionally to meet Thomas's. She no longer looked uncertain about being there. She was beginning to believe that this home truly welcomed her. But when they stepped outside later to feed the animals, all 3 froze at the same time. Footprints. Fresh ones. Not Thomas's. Not Emily's. And definitely not Naya's. These footprints were deep and heavy, from someone who had walked around the edges of the ranch during the night. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. Naya stepped closer to her, gripping her hand instinctively. Thomas knelt to study the tracks. He didn't say anything at first, but his jaw tightened. Someone had come again. Someone had walked close enough to see the house, close enough to know people were inside. Emily whispered, "Dad, what do we do?" Thomas stood slowly, brushing dirt off his hands. "We stay calm. We stay together. And we stay ready." They went inside, locking the doors. Thomas told them to stay in the kitchen while he checked the barn and the back of the property. Emily watched him from the window with fear in her eyes, and Naya stood beside her silently, as if her presence alone could steady Emily's heart. 20 minutes passed before Thomas returned. His face was serious, but he didn't look frightened. "They were close," he said quietly, "but they didn't come inside. That means they're trying to see if she's here." Naya's shoulders tensed. Emily wrapped an arm around her. "We won't let them take her," she whispered firmly. Thomas nodded. "No one is taking anyone." Later that afternoon, the sheriff arrived again with 2 deputies. They looked around, checked the footprints, and talked with Thomas for a long time near the gate. The sheriff's face was tight with concern. "Those footprints weren't made by the riders from yesterday," he said. "This is a different group." Thomas frowned. "More than one group looking for her?" The sheriff nodded slowly. "Seems so. But listen, you're not alone. We'll handle this the right way. No one will cause trouble here." Thomas felt relieved hearing that. When the sheriff left, Naya watched again from the window. But this time, her eyes didn't hold fear, they held hope. The rest of the day passed quietly, but all 3 of them moved with slight caution. Emily stayed close to Naya, showing her how to water the plants and feed the chickens. Thomas worked around the ranch, but he never went far. He always stayed within earshot of the house. Near evening, while Emily and Naya were collecting eggs from the chicken coop, they heard voices approaching from the road. Both froze. Emily grabbed Naya's hand and gently but urgently pulled her toward the house. "Dad!" she called out. Thomas stepped onto the porch, his heart pounding. 3 riders were approaching, their horses kicking up dust as they drew close. These weren't the same 2 from before. These men were older, looked angrier, and rode with purpose. Thomas walked down the steps slowly, positioning himself between the riders and the house. The leader of the group spoke first. "We're searching for a lost woman. Apache. Young. You might have seen her." Thomas kept his voice steady. "I haven't seen anyone." But the man's gaze drifted toward the house, noticing shadows in the windows. "Funny," he said with a cold smile. "We heard she ran this way." Thomas didn't move. "This is private property. You should move along." The man shifted in his saddle. "We're not leaving without answers." Inside the house, Emily grabbed Naya's hand and whispered, "Stay behind me." Naya nodded, her breathing unsteady but her eyes full of trust. Outside, Thomas stood firm. "You're not coming onto my land." The leader narrowed his eyes and kicked his horse forward a few steps. "We will search, whether you like it or not." Thomas raised his voice. "No, you won't." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The wind blew dust across the ground, and the horses snorted. The man looked ready to press forward when another sound echoed from down the road: hoofbeats. Strong, steady, and fast. The sheriff and 2 deputies appeared over the rise, riding hard. They reached the ranch in seconds, stopping directly between Thomas and the 3 strangers. The sheriff's voice was sharp. "That's enough." The strangers looked startled. The sheriff glared at them. "This ranch is under our protection. You're trespassing." One of the riders tried to argue, but the sheriff wouldn't let him speak. "If this young woman you're chasing is innocent, you have no right to bother her. And if she's not guilty of anything, you definitely have no right to take her anywhere." The leader clenched his jaw. "She belongs with us." "No," the sheriff replied firmly. "She belongs where she feels safe. And she is safe here." The deputies moved their hands near their holsters, not threatening, but clearly ready if needed. The strangers realized they were outnumbered and outpowered. They backed their horses away, unwillingly at first, but finally accepting they had no choice. "We'll be back," the leader muttered. "No, you won't," the sheriff said sharply. "You step foot near this ranch again, and you'll answer to the law." The riders turned and left, disappearing down the road. The moment they were gone, Thomas felt his shoulders relax. He let out a long breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Emily ran outside, hugging him tightly. "Dad, are you okay?" He hugged her back. "I'm fine." Naya stepped onto the porch too, her eyes wide with emotion. She looked at Thomas first, then at the sheriff, then back at Thomas again. Slowly, she walked down the steps and stood before him. She placed a hand gently over her heart and whispered her gratitude in her soft voice. Emily translated the parts Naya couldn't express. She said, "You gave her something she never expected. Safety." Thomas looked at Naya with a gentle smile. "You're part of this home now, and no one can take that from you." The sheriff nodded. "She's safe here, and anyone who tries to take her won't get far." As the sun set, the three of them, Thomas, Emily, and Naya, sat on the porch together. The sky glowed in warm colors, the air calm after so many days of worry. Emily leaned on her father, and Naya sat close beside them, her eyes soft with peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Emily whispered, "Dad, we really protected her." Thomas nodded slowly. "Yes, and she protected us too, because in saving Naya, they had discovered something deeper. They had become more than a family of two. They had become three people, bound by trust, kindness, and courage. And from that day on, the ranch wasn't just a place to live. It became a place of new beginnings,